Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So, I almost didn't want to make this review. I'm actually a little nervous to do it just because this is actually like one of my favorite movies of all time, and for a while it like was my favorite movie of all time. I don't know if it still is at this point. I'd have to like think about it. And this is like my one chance, like I only do like one review of a movie ever, like on my channel, even if I rewatch something. So I'm like, this is it. I just this movie's just so good. I find it interesting because it's like partially like a Kubrick movie and partially a Spielberg movie, in that they were like working on it together. And then, Kubrick passes away in like 1999. The movie's like released in 2001, so like Spielberg had to finish the movie. I always just find developmental stuff like that, like reading about those things, kind of fascinating. I was like actually just looking Wikipedia about some of that stuff right now and some things I'd read on there, because I bought this movie. I've always really liked this movie. I never really find it on streaming though. And then I was visiting my brother, and we went to these like little thrift stores, and I happened to find it on DVD, and I was so excited, where I was like, oh my gosh, it's this movie. He's never seen it and probably wouldn't care, so I didn't get to like share my excitement with him, but I was personally excited. And then I forgot the movies when I went back home, and I was really bummed because I really wanted to watch this again. And then my brother visited for Thanksgiving. I finally got the movies back, and then today I finally actually sat down and watched it. It was mostly like to test out the DVDs. It was the last of my DVDs I needed, from that I've been buying from like swap meets or thrift stores or whatever, that I needed to like test out on our DVD player to make sure it worked. Luckily it does, so now I just get to keep the movie forever and get to watch it whenever I want. I'm super happy about that. But then my parents came home when I was watching it, and I actually didn't get to finish the DVD. So this is one of my probably only reviews where it's like I didn't watch the entirety of the movie, but I'm still going to talk about it anyway because I took notes and I got very, very close to finishing the movie. Plus, I already know how it ends. If anything, I'm actually kind of glad where it stopped, because it was like right before this part where the main character gets like trapped somewhere, and it's like right before the end, and that part that I was almost going to get to, the main character getting trapped, honestly would have been like the perfect place to end the movie, to the point where in my mind that's like still where I imagine it ends. So it works out for me anyway. I'm gonna be like spoiling the heck out of this movie, and I do not want to like ruin this movie for anybody because that's how much I liked it. So if you've never, I'll give like a general description of it, and I'll also read my notes eventually, but like, once I'm done with my little description, I'm gonna start spoiling things and stuff. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it and then come back to this, please. Okay, so this is okay. No, sorry, I'm like trying to get my thoughts in order. I'm like so excited to talk about it. I like don't know where to start. I ended up finding out about this movie, I think from like TV Tropes, if I remember right, because I used to use that site, like just going on there a ton when I was like in my freshman and sophomore years of high school. I was just really into it because I've always been like really into movies and stuff. I've always, for whatever reason, like really like movies that are about fictional like robots and androids and stuff. I mean, not just with movies, it could be with like games too. Like Nier Automata is one of my favorites, partially for that reason. But I just find those stories of like sentient robots or whatever that have to go on this whole little journey of learning like what it means to be human. There's just something about that, I guess, kind of little subgenre or whatever, that I just find so fascinating, especially if it's like robot characters that are either like kind of like the more already human they sort of physically kind of start off as, in a sense. I feel like they're easier to like connect to, but then I just get more interested where it's either like an android that's like played by a human person, rather than being like CGI or an animatronic or whatever, or even, and actually especially if it's ones where it's like the character looks like a robot and whatever, but then they're like voiced by a human person, but then they always do this kind of thing of somehow making them sound more robotic, where it's either like the person's voice is edited so it sounds like a little more like it's coming out of a computer speaker or something, or one of my favorites, like with HAL 9000, I don't think they do anything to Douglas Rain's voice. I think from what I've read, it was just like, I think it was something of like when he recorded his lines, he had like his feet up and got in like a really relaxed position, because as Hal, you know, there isn't anything added to his voice. It's just that he talks in this very like slow, kind of relaxing way that could just be like naturally how his voice sounds, that like fits with this robot character. You know, there's just something about like robots with human voices I just tend to like empathize with more and stuff. I think because it's like the whole thing where it's like they could have like a sort of robot mindset, not that much sentience or whatever, but if they sound like a person, it just makes them sound more real, especially if they already act a little human. Man, 2001, now that I even brought up HAL, I feel like, okay, I need to go watch it again. You're gonna get a playlist from me eventually that's just gonna be like Bumble's fictional robot movie reviews or whatever, and on that would probably be like this movie, 2001 A Space, just off the top of my head, 2001 A Space Odyssey, Moon, even though the main character isn't like a robot, and one of my personal favorites, Electric Dreams. I'm gonna have to like start that next year or something. Anyway, this is a movie about a robot who's supposed to already like look like a child and everything. He's played by Haley Joel Osment. This is actually the movie I know Haley Joel Osment for, which feels funny because I feel like with everyone else I talk to, you know, everyone knows him for like The Sixth Sense, which I've also seen. It's also a good movie. I think I know he's still like an actor as an adult, but I think I know him more for like the childhood acting things than any of the adult stuff. Like I know he voices like Sora in Kingdom Hearts, and there's you know, The Sixth Sense, the movie with him I actually grew up with, where he's like a little bit older, with Secondhand Lions. That one's actually pretty good. I used to watch that with my parents. But in terms of him as like a child, because he's like a teen in that one, this was like the movie I knew him for, which it's always kind of crazy when you watch a movie where a character, you know, the first thing you ever watch them in is like when they're playing a non-human character, like they're playing a robot or they're playing like an alien, especially if they're more, their character seems more like not really human like when actors play like robots and stuff, you know, like even how Haley Joel Osment plays David in this, of just having these sort of movements and like the way he talks that just feels kind of bit of the uncanny valley, really, that just feels kind of robotic and almost like a little creepy. And then you get to see the same actor in like a movie where they're like a ordinary human person, like not Sixth Sense was the next one I watched, but there was some movie I had to watch in one of my classes where everyone was like, hey, it's the kid from The Sixth Sense, where he played like a normal elementary student or whatever, and it was so weird for me because I'm so used to him as the character David in this, where I'm like, wait, he's just like a normal kid or something. Like it threw me off. But yeah, he plays the main character David. I have a note about his performance in here somewhere. Oh wait, sorry, I have to give the non-spoilery description first. Okay, I'm gonna do that and then I'm gonna start spoiling everything. I know I'm like wasting so much time with this. I'm less doing this as a review to like get people to watch the movie. This video is more of just like me wanting to just really gush about it. Yeah. Okay, so it's about this it takes place in the future, I don't remember what year, where humanity has almost kind of fucked up the environment with like global warming and stuff. It's basically like the human population is going down the toilet. I don't think people are like giving birth as much anymore. So then humans ended up making these like humanoid robots that do various things. Like some of them are like sex bots and stuff. They're referred to as lover bots. There's Actually, we don't really see that many kinds, to be honest. There's one that's played by Chris Rock and is like a comedian robot or something. The robots in this movie are referred to as mechas. I'm gonna try to remember to call them that. And then there's this guy who's named Dr. Hobby. It's actually really interesting with like the beginning of the movie where he's basically describing how he wants to create David, he's gonna make like the first ever like robot child, because that's like not a thing that people do for reasons I want to talk about once I'm done with the description. So he makes this robot kid. He wants to make a robot that has the ability to love, like to be able to love someone the same way like a human person would, where a person would be able to love the robot back. And he decides to make this mecha, specifically a child, because he thinks that this would be like the easiest to mimic of like the love between a child and their parent. And he's given to this guy named Henry, who is like an employee for the company. I don't remember what it's called. And it's Henry and his wife Monica, and they're given David, and David's like a prototype, but the way they handle him as a prototype is so weird to me, because there's this whole thing where they have a son who's in like a coma, so they're not technically like an actual childless couple. I'll get into that in a minute too. And they have this thing where you can like have David imprint on you, and that's like part of his design of like the experiencing love thing, where it will make it so he can only imprint on like one person, so I guess not both parents, which is kind of sucky, and he will love that person till like the end of time, even if that person dies, even if it's like a bajillion years in the future, because unless David like rusts or his battery runs out or something, he's gonna live longer than the human race, so he will continue to love that person forever. And it's irreversible to the point where if they decide, yeah, this robot's creepy, I don't want him anymore, but if they already have him imprint, they have to return him to the factory and he will be destroyed. So that's the whole thing. So it's basically they're kind of, I guess, like a test family, or maybe not a test family, because they kind of expect them to like imprint with David and stuff, but he's just like the prototype and he's given to them, and that's pretty much it. And it like continues from there. Okay, that's like, I guess, the non-spoiler thing, because then stuff happens and then David becomes like more of the main character, but that's like in terms of spoilers as far as I can go. Okay, I'm gonna continue. So I mentioned a couple things. The thing of like making a child robot, I was just thinking about it throughout the movie. I have a note about it in here somewhere. Let me see. Why is it not popping up in my notes? It kind of reminded me actually of the same problem in I watched the movie a while ago, Interview with a Vampire. I think I did a review of it, but I don't 100% remember actually. But in that movie, because it's like easy for me to make a comparison, it's about these two adult vampires, and at some point in the movie they meet this little girl who's like mom had like just died, and her name is Claudia, and they know that Claudia's gonna die. I'm gonna try to make this part quick. And they turn her into a vampire, and it introduces the problem where since she's an immortal, but she died when she was a child, or that's when she was turned, she's going to be a child forever. And it's this whole thing where her mind is aging to the point where she's an adult, but then she's stuck in the body of a child, so she can't really do like adult things. I mean, even if she could, adults wouldn't want to do it with her. So she can't really experience like romantic relationships or sexual stuff, or like really any adult things, or even just having an adult mind and having like an adult body to match. She can never have that, along with the whole thing of like she died as a child, and even though she's like mentally aged to an adult, she still has like a little bit of a childlike mindset in a sense. It's not like she got to like grow up and reach adult maturity and then get turn into a vampire, even if she like physically looks like a kid or whatever. So that, and it's like a big no-no in that movie of like turning kids into vampires, because morally there's like so many problems, you know, as I explained. And that's kind of the thing with like robot children in this movie. Not that we ever get to see that with David. David is a child, you know, for this entire movie. That's what he was like basically born as an 11-year-old pretty much. So he doesn't have that exact problem, but because he has the childlike mindset, I don't think his mind can age. But they mentioned in the movie of like they don't really talk about it too much, of like no one's ever made a child robot before, like why would you, is something that one of the characters asks at some point, because everyone in this movie that meets David is surprised of like, you're a child robot, whoa. What was I going to say? And the company that made him, designed him, is like the perfect child, you know, that like every couple would want. And then eventually they even do this thing where it turns out they made more versions of David, because, you know, this one was just the prototype. And something else I want to talk about too, the way they handle David, of him like officially being a prototype, is just so terrible and stuff. Like the two big things that are really weird to me is like, he's a prototype, so you think they'd want to like keep an eye on him as he's living with Henry and Monica, but they don't. The company doesn't track him at all. They don't have like a tracking chip kind of thing inside of him in case he like gets lost or whatever. And it's like crazy, because David eventually gets to like meet his creator in person at like a later portion of the movie. And the creator, like, sort of knew what David was up to, but not really. It's really weird, where it's like, okay, David eventually gets separated from Monica, and he has to go on a little adventure by himself. And apparently, during whatever portion of the movie that is, the company, I guess they mentioned of like, yeah, we lost you for a little bit. And then they intervened one time in order to kind of get David to come back to them. And then they're super excited to meet him. And they're like, whoa, you went on this whole journey. And they're not even upset that like how David got separated from the family, which I'll explain in a while, or the fact that he literally almost got destroyed at one point, and he only was saved because of how like human like he is, and it like freaked people out, and he was like saved. And yeah, he could have been destroyed. The fact that the family didn't take him to the factory to be destroyed after they had him imprinted or whatever, he just gets like abandoned basically. And they didn't keep an eye on him or whatever. Anything could have happened to him, and he's their prototype. I mean, probably by that point they were already making, because they decide to make a full line of child robots called like David and I think Darlene or whatever. So I guess, you know, they don't need him anymore, but, you know, they probably don't start that immediately, like when David's first given to Henry and Monica. So the fact that this company, and he's supposed to be this like precious, well-made, like expensive thing, to the point where other people meet him and they're like, wow, you're like so well constructed compared to like all the other robots in the movie. And you can like tell from the way you see like a variety of robot designs in this movie. And the whole thing of him being able to like imprint, where it's like if you want to get rid of him, he's basically like useless after you like imprint him. And the fact that he's a first of his kind, and everyone keeps telling David like how special he is, the point where he starts saying it too. And the fact that this company basically takes like no responsibility for their prototype like whatsoever. Like, I get that they're trusting him in the hands of an employee and it should be fine. If anything, Henry doesn't really treat David well, where he is like urging his wife throughout the movie to like get rid of David, even though he's the one that like brought him home and said like, the company is trusting me so much with this and whatever. And he explains the whole imprinting thing to his wife, and then actually after the wife imprints the thing with David, and Monica ends up liking David more, and Henry is just kind of really weirded out by David or something, and thinks that he's gonna like hurt the family, and then is the one that forces his wife to like abandon David pretty much. So it's kind of crazy. And the whole thing with like the couple, he should have been given a different couple. Like, I understand with Henry, it's like he's an employee of the company, and they mention at one point, they say like, oh, because he's had this personal tragedy, referring to their human son that's in like a coma. I'll explain that in a bit. Of saying like because of his unique circumstances, it puts him higher than like everyone else, and like who should get David. It's so okay. They have a human son. His name's Martin. He's like the same age as David. He's in like this suspended animation thing because he has some kind of rare disease. And at the beginning of the movie, it's kind of described as no one thinks he's going to be like cured. He's basically just like in a coma forever. And Henry doesn't really react to it too much, but Monica is like pretty much already at like a grieving point, like a breaking point sort of thing with her son. And Henry basically like convinces the company kind of to give him David basically as like a replacement goldfish for Martin, so his wife is like less sad. And I mean, Henry does end up sort of being right about things in a way where as David's doing some kind of sus things that actually like aren't his fault, he's like trying to tell his wife like, hey, David might be capable of violence, we should like keep an eye on him or whatever. Who know if he's capable of love, wouldn't he be capable of hate? And you do get to see David like have a full-on crash out, not to Martin but to someone else later on in the movie, that he feels like threatened, and the feelings towards Monica, who he refers to as his mom. But yeah, there's the whole problem where they have a son where you think like, okay, the son's in a coma, it sounds like incurable, it should be like fine or whatever. But then like towards even the beginning of the movie, Martin is just suddenly cured of his disease, and now he's part of the plot. And I mean, you do kind of think like, oh, maybe David's gonna be jealous of him. That's actually not what happens. Instead, kids do stupid things, and it causes these situations where David looks like really suspicious, but he's not, and he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He actually isn't really even jealous of Martin. He's like completely fine with Martin. Martin's actually the one that gets jealous of David. But even though that happens and David's fine, it's the whole possibility of like, what if David was jealous of Martin and thinking of like, oh, he's not only like a rival for Monica's affections, but also the fact that it's Monica's like human son and David's a robot, and what if he feels threatened by that too? Like, there's so many possibilities, especially because the characters around David, but specifically Martin, are like constantly reminding him of like, yeah, you're just a robot, and not treating him as like a sentient like person. I guess because like there's different kind of robots that are built in this universe, and it ranges from like some characters do treat them like humans, and some just view them as like a place to put their hate basically. And there's a lot of the humans just kind of almost view them as like toys and stuff. It's like a whole thing. But yeah, there's so many things that could have gone wrong with like him not being tracked as a prototype, and him giving to this couple that like already has a kid. I feel like David, especially because the beginning of the movie, they say how I specifically remember them saying something like the birth rates are really low and stuff, and eventually some of the characters comment on that, and they're like, oh, they're building these robot children to replace your children. And I guess that reason would sort of make sense of like why eventually they start trying to build robot children after David's made of for those childless couples, because the world's already kind of ending at this point, so these people could have children. So I could see where the market is for that. But I'm like, why isn't David given one of these couples? Of maybe someone that like had a child that like actually died, or I could imagine, I feel like the best case scenario would be like maybe a couple that like really wants to have a child and like can't for whatever reason. Maybe someone's sterile, or they can't like get to adopt a child or something, and then they could get like a robot child. Or I could imagine even for like an old couple or actually I don't know if an old couple would like want a child, because they'd have to take care of the child, and eventually they'd have to like die, and then the child, I mean, that's the other thing with like a child robot is like eventually that's like a child for its entire life, of like the human is going to die and the child robot is like mentally a child forever. And the characters do talk about that. Like, literally one of the first things that David asks Monica, I don't remember if it's like before or after the imprinting, I think it's after, where he's worried and he says like, how long will you live? Because that's the other thing. Oh, that's something else that's interesting to me with this movie, is they never, when referring to the robots or the humans, you know, like the mechas and stuff, I think they have the terms like mechas and organics is shortened to ormies, something like that, some shortening of the word organic. They never really say human. It's interesting. Like, whenever David talks, especially because there's a lot of things in this movie that are related to Pinocchio, I guess that's probably the reason why, or even other people talking about David, they never say like, oh, he isn't human, or David saying, I want to become a human. It's always, they use the word real instead. They're like, you're not a real person, or his whole thing of like, I want to be a real boy. And I find that kind of interesting. Or they don't say like he wants to be organic or anything, especially because there's a scene later when David finally meets his creator and he tells the creator how he wants to be real, and the creator says something of like, oh, but you are real, like you are human, like in a personality sense, but David wants to become like a physical human. He thinks if that happens, like in Pinocchio, that will earn him his mother's love. But I just find that interesting on like the language that they use in this, with the whole thing of wanting to become real in that sense. But yeah, the fact that they didn't give him to like a childless couple, you know, that, I mean, we have to have things go wrong for the plot, but the fact that they have to go wrong immediately in that, just the way they handle this prototype is like so bad. And Martin is the reason specifically that a lot of things go wrong, in that Martin's behavior causes these things to happen, and then the family decides to abandon David, and then from there the family is actually like never seen again until the ending, and then we just followed David's journey. Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna finally go into my notes. How long have I been talking for? Oh my gosh, it's been 30 minutes, but like I said, there's like a billion things I could talk about with this movie. Soundtrack, for example, I really like the soundtrack in this. I'm just gonna cover that really quick. It sounds sci-fi in the sense that it's like kind of just a bit creepy. It's very like, I think, instrumental. There isn't really that many vocals. No, there's vocals that are kind of like operatic, and it was something I was reading about, and I was thinking back to the soundtrack, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, where it's supposed to sound a little similar to like the 2001 A Space Odyssey soundtrack. This movie is actually supposed to kind of have similar vibes, supposedly. Then again, I'm reading this off like Wikipedia, so don't take that too seriously. But in terms of the 2001 Space Odyssey comparisons to like the soundtrack of this movie, I 100% get it, because I was kind of getting that vibe, not just with like the choir that's used in there, but also just the way it sounds, and it's sort of this kind of lonely emptiness to the music. Apparently John Williams composed and conducted the music, which is pretty cool. You know, if there's like any soundtracks he's doing, they're always peak. But yeah, as I was watching the movie, I started looking up the soundtrack. If anything, the soundtrack also kind of reminds me, maybe just because I'm thinking of robot movies, another one I forgot to mention, it's one with Robin Williams. Oh gosh, I can picture the poster. He plays an android that becomes more and more human as the movie goes on, and he goes on a journey kind of like David's a little bit, where you learn about the other robots. I don't remember what it's called. This movie also has Robin Williams, by the way. I don't know. I think these kind of robot movies have this kind of lonely feel to the music, is like a theme that I noticed that's kind of cool. Also for being like sci-fi and stuff. Okay, yeah, that's my thing on the soundtrack. Okay, let's see. I talked about David and the childless couple thing. Monica's kind of, the parents are interesting. I talked about Henry a little bit, of how he kind of, he's the one that's like, please don't be mad at me, Monica, but I brought home this robot. And Monica okay, no, Henry, once David's imprinted, Henry kind of doesn't really care about David and is trying to get rid of him, and David's just kind of whatever towards Henry. Monica's interesting to me as a character. I feel like I feel a little more sympathy for her now that I've watched it, like rewatched it, where she's like crying as the first time she sees David, and she gets like into an argument. Like it's literally like David's at their house, and then literally cuts to the next scene, and she's like yelling at her husband and crying because, you know, he brought David home without asking. You can't just like make the big decision of bringing home another child and everything. And she's going through this like really emotional process of like processing that her own human son has this incurable disease, and she's already going through it. And the fact that you're bringing home another child is like hey, it's a replacement. And the fact that her husband has to reassure her of like, yeah, it's a robot, it's not a real child or whatever. And even from the beginning, Monica's saying like, oh, but from the outside he looks so real. And that's my thing, where I'm like, I should have given him to a childless couple. Because if the whole thing is to test that he's capable of experiencing love, and the imprinting thing where someone falls in love with this child and wants them to love them back, you know, as their parent and stuff, and the fact that like literally day one this person's like, right, I have to remember that he's a robot and he's not a real human, he's not like a real child. If you're going in with that mindset, then you shouldn't have something like this. I mean, Monica is the one that does the imprinting thing, and she does end up caring about David, but not ever really enough to like where she truly loves him or anything. He's just kind of there, so that's like a little annoying. I mean, I could understand why she's wary of David at first. It's like a little creepy. He's a little creepy at the beginning before the imprinting stuff, and that's what goes so good with Haley Joel Osment's acting and stuff. Where did I have it in my notes? Where he at the beginning of the movie is like, he's the way he stares and kind of stalks Monica. He says almost like nothing before he gets imprinted, and then as soon as the imprinting scene happens, there's like this kind of immediate sort of softness in his eyes, and he already just seems more human. Like he sounds human when he talks, even at the beginning. Like his voice doesn't really sound weird. It's just kind of the way he innocently asks questions of being like, oh, are we playing a game? What's happening? Whatever. And he doesn't really react to anything, and just behaving not in a way that like most children do. But then as soon as he gets imprinted, he's like immediately calling Monica mommy, and he does for like the rest of the movie. And he has this very like kind of I mean, he's supposed to be 11, but it's like the way he talks to her and stuff, and the sweetness in his voice, almost of like if you're interacting with like a 5-year-old with their mom or something, kind of a vibe that's just supposed to be like very like sweet and cute and innocent or whatever. But at the beginning of the movie, he is a bit creepy. I can see why she doesn't want him around, where it's literally like she's just doing tasks around the house. We got like a little montage, and the music is kind of a little creepy too, and he's just following her around. Like he'll just suddenly be there, not like he's like literally teleporting or chasing after her, but she'll like they do this stuff where she'll like flip a blanket, and then the blanket goes back down, and then David is like revealed to be there and stuff like that, where he's following her. And it's funny because she hasn't even imprinted on him yet. She's not the one that like picked him out and brought him home or whatever, but he's immediately already following her around, like he's basically like that's my chosen human or whatever. And he doesn't act this way towards Henry. We don't even see Henry for a while after like David's introduced, and you know, he's like slightly getting in the way, and she's creeped out, probably weirded out that he's like a child that won't just like entertain himself. But she just is like ignoring him, like not even making eye contact. Like at least talk to him, engage, give him something to do. Like if it was me and it was like I'm not really good with like kids or anything because I don't have much experience with them, but if there was like a kid or like a robot kid that was just following me around, even if I didn't want to talk to them, probably because she's thinking like, okay, he looks like a human but he's a robot, I have to remember he's a robot, you know, like, she's like a parent. She's raised a kid before. Like, at least give him some toys, or if you don't want him around and he's creeping you out, just like at least give him something to do if you don't want to interact with him. I feel like that's so obvious, especially because Martin's room turns out to be completely intact to the point where David literally just sleeps in that bed. So the fact that she can't, and we see later it's like a really cool like little playroom and with all these toys and crayons and things that David eventually gets to use. So it's like, can't you just give him something to do? A lot of the camera shots in this movie are honestly just so good. Like, just visually, this movie's really cool. Like, at the dinner, I didn't notice it the first time I watched. They have this, like, light that's sort of oval shaped, and there's the camera is like above the light and it's looking down on like the family, and their light thing, it's like this overhead shot, this circle of light, or not the light, but like the shape of the lamp thing or whatever, is making a circle like framing David, but then with the outer edges of the light, it's like separating him from the family. They're like outside the circle, so it's like visually supposed to like it's making him like literally look more angelic and stuff, but it's also like literally separating him in that shot from the family, of showing like he's different. I found that really interesting. There's kind of stuff like that throughout the movie, not like that in your face, but of just keeping him separated from everyone. The dinner scene is so awkward when he has his first dinner with the family, where David is kind of okay, because he's not supposed to eat like human food. He's mimicking their fork movements, and then he just laughs super loud out of nowhere, and they kind of laugh at him, but it's kind of like a what the fuck kind of laugh. And no one talks during the dinner. It's really weird how like we get the next scene finally where Monica is like talking to David while he's in bed. He's like, I think she's reading him a story or something. They're like finally interacting, but for like the first like couple of days David's there, no one talks to him at all, except I think when Monica puts him in like a closet or something. She literally like drags him to a closet. And the dinner thing's kind of sad because there's multiple dinner scenes. Like the first one, you know, he's kind of mimicking their fork movements, and then later on Martin is there and he kind of tricks David into eating some food, and it causes David's face to melt and messes up his insides for a little bit. It doesn't have any permanent consequences though. He ends up getting fixed and it's fine. But then later on you hear David at one point, he's asking like what's for dinner, and Monica says something of like, oh, you know you're not allowed to eat human food or to eat food or something, and David's like, yeah, I know, I just like sitting at the table. Like he knows he can't eat. I don't know if he's jealous of their ability to eat or whatever, but the fact that he just doesn't mind like just sitting there at the table and just, even if no one's talking or whatever, because I guess this family doesn't talk during dinner, the fact that he just wants to sit there and like hang out with the family. And it's not like he's like completely obsessed with them. I mean, he is obsessed with Monica, but it's not like he's, once he gets imprinted, he's like following her around 24/7 or anything. He does other stuff, like especially once Martin enters the picture, David is like coloring things and playing with toys and like just able to entertain himself and stuff. But it's nice when he like finally gets to interact with her, where she's, I think she tucks him into bed and she's reading him a story or something, and it's Martin's bed. Martin has a really cool bed actually, where it's like this little bed that's shaped like a pod and it has like a blue light inside. I didn't even realize it was like Martin's bed at first. It's not really shaped like a bed at all. Maybe it's comfy, I don't know, but the blue light sounds like a nice thing. Sounds like it would like soothe you to sleep. But then eventually when Martin ends up coming home, Martin sleeps in the bed, and there's a part where Monica is reading him a story that I'll talk about when I get there, and then I think it's Pinocchio actually, and then David is just sitting on the floor. Like, they didn't get David a second bed. I mean, they do establish immediately where David says like, oh, I can't sleep, I can just sit there and close my eyes and not make a peep. I mean, at least they don't put him like in like a low power mode or an off thing. He never has to like charge or anything either. But the fact that they don't even like give him like some pillows or something to kind of mimic a bed or whatever, especially because David's thing, like part of the reason he loves his mom and the imprinting stuff, is he just wants her to do like normal parent things with him of like tucking him into bed and reading him stories. He just wants to be a part of this family so bad, even though he knows he's not like a human person. He doesn't have the ability to like eat or sleep. He wants to just kind of not experience these things for himself because he's curious, but more so of like just being treated like a normal child, like a normal human child by this family, just so badly. This movie's so fucking heartbreaking, dude. And then after that scene where he gets tucked into bed, she does the imprinting thing. I think it's because they show when like she's looking at David in bed with the blue light, and then it cuts to her thinking about Martin and his coma thing, and there isn't any dialogue for that part, and then the next scene is him imprinting thing on him. I think it's that maybe, I don't know if it's like she realizes of like, oh, I finally lost my son, you know, there isn't anything I can do, and her like accepting that, or maybe because she misses her son so badly, she wants something like him again, and David, you know, doesn't really do much when he's not imprinted, so she's thinking like, oh, maybe if I make it more human, it'll like fill that void. You know, I actually do like that part doesn't have dialogue or anything, but she does, like, I understand what she's feeling and stuff, and I feel bad for her with her son. She's like clearly going through it, but the fact that, and okay, the one thing that does annoy me is we don't get like a mention of time of like how long David's been with the family. We just see like just different scenes of them doing stuff, like Monica and Henry go to a party and they leave David alone, or when Martin's around, there's like time is clearly moving, but it kind of annoys me we don't know how much time, because it's like cutting between things, and it goes from like the bed scene to the imprint scene, and I'm over here thinking like, we don't know how long they've known each other. It could literally have been like, if you're going from like a day and night thing and not skipping ahead through days, it's probably at most maybe like 3 days, and she's already doing the imprinting thing. And the thing is, her husband warned her immediately and like took the time to explain to her of like, hey, if you imprint on him, you have to make sure you like 100% want to do this. It's irreversible. If you don't want him anymore after the imprinting thing, he literally will be killed by the company, and you have to like take him there. I think they say it's for like safety reasons or something, but I feel like it makes sense, you know, because then it creates the problem that ends up happening in this movie where the family doesn't want him and they abandon him instead of taking him to get destroyed. I'm not saying he should die, but then he, like, yeah, they got rid of him or whatever, but David like will want Monica forever, so it gets like messed up. But yeah, they don't really know each other that well. They've had like one scene together with like the bed thing, and that's not even much. Like, if we had gotten like a couple of like maybe 2 or 3 scenes where like Monica, you could see her like warming up to David or something, or if they reach a point where it seems like she's really enjoying him being there, I could understand the imprinting thing. I just wish it felt earned rather than just her making like a very hasty decision, especially because she's been explained to about this stuff. Like, she ignores him, she's scared of him, so it's like, why the hell is she imprinting when she doesn't like him? And she knows if she changes her mind, it's like it gets screwed up for David. But she does that. She doesn't even really explain it to him either. I mean, I don't know if he's supposed to know or anything. Like, David seems to know, like, okay, he's a robot, he can't sleep, he can't eat, he knows he's not human, and seems to be like okay with it, at least until like later on when a certain thing happens. But I mean, he is interested in her even before the imprinting. Oh wait, no, that's from my other notes. But yeah, they do the imprinting thing, and I never really paid attention to it the first time I watched. But it seems like Monica does like David more. Like their happiest scene together is when the imprint thing happens, and he says that he loves her, and he calls her mommy, and she's like, "What did you just say?" And they hug. It's like the nicest part she is with him. And then we get to see him do some stuff where there's like a part where he's like, "Look what I can do," and he picks up a phone, and the person's voice is coming out of his mouth, and Dave and Monica's just like, "Okay, David, that's enough," or whatever. That part was kind of funny. And they don't even have David imprinted that long, and then Martin is just like kind of suddenly revived. What is kind of nice is that Monica like does still try to be nice to David. Like before the Martin stuff happens, she gives David a teddy bear that's named Teddy, that's like a toy. And I find Teddy interesting as a character too, where he's sentient to like some degree, where the only person he cares about is David, in a similar way to like how David cares about Monica. Not in a way where he, you know, gets upset when he's like separated from David, but it's interesting because like David doesn't really care that much about Teddy. Teddy just kind of follows him around and stuff, and I feel like it's the same way of like how Monica probably feels towards David, and Teddy is like just as attached to David as like David is attached to Monica, of like always trying to find him and stuff, and it's kind of sad. But yeah, he's given a little toy bear that talks. He's referred to as a super toy. I think it's like the nicest thing that Monica does for David is giving him that bear. And it's right after David is like, hey, you're gonna how long are you going to live? And she says, probably like till I'm 100 or something or whatever. And he's like, oh, is that a long time or something? Like, I think he knows that, because he says something of like, oh, then I'll be alone. Like he knows that he can't age and she's eventually going to die. That's gotta be so depressing to like mentally be a kid and knowing you can't age and knowing that the person you're supposed to love forever will like eventually die and you can't do anything about it. But yeah, then he's given the bear, and then Martin is like such a little shit. Like he views David as a toy, and he starts poking and touching David without asking and wanting David to like break stuff and whatever. And it's weird. He like talks to David as if he's not like a sentient person, and then loves to remind him how he isn't human. And then he's the one that asks his mom to read the two of them Pinocchio, and he's like, David's gonna love it. And the mom doesn't view that as like malicious or anything, even though like to the audience it's obvious of, you know, reminding David he's not a human. But then the story of Pinocchio is extremely important to David, where he is obsessed with the blue fairy and believes that the story of Pinocchio is real. I feel like Martin should have been told how David works, because Martin, even though he doesn't really know what David's for or anything, he gets jealous and is trying to get rid of David the whole time. Like he manipulates David into doing creepy things in order for the parents to get rid of him, and on the premise of telling David like, yeah, they'll love you if you do this stuff. And David, you know, is very, very innocent, where he doesn't know that it's like, oh, this would be a thing that would get me in trouble. Martin's kind of also weird, where he's ironically like the only one that treats David as like a human in a sense, where he like tries to get to learn about David and talk to him and ask him questions, which sounds like, oh, they're trying to get to know each other, but it's more so of like treating him like a new toy or something, of like, oh, are you able to shoot lasers or fly or whatever? And the poking the face thing, where he's like, he thinks like David's a doll at first, and he's confused because he sees mechas like in their world and stuff, and he's like, why is this one different? He's like disappointed in David's existence and the fact that he's like, oh, you just look like a normal kid or whatever. And the fact that he views David as so ordinary and basically treats him like an adoptive younger brother. So he like treats David kind of more human than everyone else, in the fact that he doesn't view David as special, mostly because he doesn't know or care. And it's just like, oh, my parents just basically got like another kid while I was gone, and now you live here. Okay. But then for everyone else, or at least for David's makers and like the people who understand how robots work, they're just like, oh my gosh, you're like a child robot and you have the ability to love, and the people that can like understand David's true purpose and everything view him as like a miracle. And then Martin's just like, oh, you're just like a kid that's weird and whatever, and all the other kids kind of view David as weird too. I mean, because they're children and stuff. But yeah, it's sort of interesting that like Martin treats him as normal, even though Martin's like super mean. Martin with the special thing like gets David to eat spinach, and it damages David, and the people are like, hey, that are like fixing David are like, hey, you're not supposed to eat this is for humans and Popeye, not for robots and stuff. And it like damages David, and the fact that David's like their only prototype and everything, and the stupid kid sort of tricked him into doing it. Was that Martin was kind of like, I think, what was it, like eating the spinach and kind of making fun of David, and it causes David to eat to like compete or whatever mentally, and then it messes up David. And Teddy even warns David of like, hey, you're not supposed to eat and whatever. But yeah, damaging this expensive equipment just to be a little brat or whatever, even though he doesn't know how special David actually is. But it is nice that Monica, you can see, sometimes still hangs out with David. Like, she hangs out with both the boys. It's kind of weird where we have like scenes where, or one scene actually I noticed where Monica and David are like cooking together or something, and then Martin shows up to interrupt. There's a part where the three of them are out on a boat and she's reading them a story, and then it shows David on the floor and Martin like in his bed and stuff. So she's like trying to include David. I mean, for Monica, it must be nice, you know, at first, where it's like, okay, I just have two sons now, cool. But then Martin is trying to get rid of David, and David actually is fine with Martin, and like trying to be his friend and stuff. So it's kind of sad. Like you think, you expect like, oh, David's gonna view him as a rival, and it's like, no, David just views him as like his brother and stuff. And then Henry isn't seen at all. There's like only two scenes where like David does some like sus stuff, but it's entirely because Martin tricks him of like cutting his mom's hair with some scissors, and then Teddy catches it, and then it actually turns out to be like the most crucial thing for the ending, that like one specific like hair cutting thing, which you never guess the ending if you watch this movie, let me tell you. We'll get to that in a bit, in like a while actually. And then there's this part where it's kind of funny. Martin has a birthday party and the family has a pool, and everyone goes in the pool except for Martin, probably because of the coma thing, I don't know. Which that sucks. It's like your own party, but you don't get to go swim with everyone else. But I mean, neither can David, or kind of. Like, the kids, they're trying to test out David, and they pull out a knife, and David gets scared and clings to Martin and almost drowns him because, you know, David... Oh, okay, I was gonna say David's entirely made of metal. But no, the poster literally says David is 11 years old, David weighs 60 pounds, so no, he weighs the same as a child. But no, David like death clings onto Martin because he's terrified. It's actually, the way it's shot is really cool, where like he's clinging onto Martin and they're underwater, and then you see David's POV where Martin is pulled away from him and the family's trying to revive him, and Martin ends up being fine, but it like freaks out the family. And then you see David, and he's sitting and he hasn't moved his arms, and he's just kind of sitting there on the floor and whatever. So he's like fine in water actually. But yeah, this is why David needs like supervision, not because he's going to do anything dangerous, because other people keep, you know, just entirely the children are just fucking around with him and stuff, and it's causing bad things to happen. Like David, you know, doesn't want to hurt anybody. He's scared of getting hurt, which you end up seeing later. And he keeps getting tricked into things. And then we get one of the like the hardest scene for me to watch in this movie. Like the first time I watched it, I just could barely get through it actually. Of just Monica, okay, she tricks David. I think it's like her husband talks her into it, because the husband keeps getting into arguments with Monica, and Monica's actually defending Monica's like on David's side even after the whole imprinting, even when she abandons him in the woods. And I didn't really understand that like the first time I watched, and now I get it, and I'm like, oh. Where her husband like convinces her to get David destroyed, and so she tricks him by saying like, hey, we're gonna go somewhere, just the two of us, and David is so excited, and she's driving to the factory, and then you can see her change her mind like the minute it happens, especially because he's asking stuff of like, hey, what's for dinner, where are we going. It kind of gives the vibe of like you're driving a dog to get like put down, even though the dog doesn't know, but like, you know, is like kind of the vibe. And then she changes her mind and abandons him in the wood. And I guess, you know, I understand that of like she's grown attached to him as like a child. He looks like a child, and your fact that you're sending him his death. You know, that's gotta not be an easy thing to do. And like she knows she has to do it, but she abandons him in the wood. And the sad thing is, it's like he wasn't trying to hurt anybody, and it's not his fault that he's coming off as like creepy and whatever. And she doesn't want to do this, and he doesn't want this. But just, I'm not saying like he should be destroyed. That's like not a good thing. But just the fact that like he's immortal, he's like very innocent of everything, and also like a literal child, and then leaving him to fend for himself, where he's like programmed to love her forever, is I think kind of worse than death, honestly. And David doesn't want to be abandoned. Like if David was like a human child where he was like taught things by parents, or even if he was just taught anything about the world, but you know, if he was like a human child, they'd naturally do that, and they'd take him places and whatever, it would be like a little better. I mean, still not good, like don't abandon your kids, but then he'd be at least somewhat aware of like people in the world. But David is like so innocent that he like doesn't really know anything, especially because there's so much like danger in this world. Like there's something called flesh fairs, which turn out to be places where they destroy robots like for fun. And she's like, don't go. She like tries to help him, or she like tells him like, don't go to flesh fairs, don't ever go in the direction of like the factory or whatever. She doesn't say like it's because they'll destroy you. She doesn't explain what flesh fairs are. She just kind of gives him this information. But it just sucks that like they're both crying. She doesn't really want to leave him, and he's, you know, designed to be like the perfect child, and then the parents just abandon him in the woods. And she apologizes, saying like she didn't tell him about the world or whatever. She feels bad. She's like realizing she should have. I mean, she didn't expect to do this, but man, David just kind of kills me more in the scene than her, because he's like crying, and or I don't know if he's like if he can like physically cry. I think he's supposed to be. He sounds like that way, like your voice gets kind of funny when you cry. I think he is. I'm assuming he has the ability to cry. But he's, you know, they're both like crying, and he's telling her like, no, don't leave me, I'll be real. I know I'm not real, I'll be real for you. And it's just really sad. Yeah, that scene's always hard for me to get through. And it's kind of funny because then we start like the rest of the plot, like the story kind of really starts, where it's like after this like touching and heartbreaking scene where David and Teddy are abandoned in the woods to fend for themselves, we immediately get the stuff with the Jude Law sex bot named Gigolo Joe. Which is so funny to me, that contrast between like this poor child is abandoned, and then it goes to sex bot talking to okay, to be fair, it doesn't go to like the anyone having like actual sex. Actually, the scene's kind of nice, but just the jump to like two people in a hotel room getting ready to do it is quite the jump. I think the makeup is interesting. I think the way they handle the robots in this movie is interesting. I want to talk about that, because like David, you know, the actor playing him doesn't wear any like makeup or anything. He's just, it's just Haley Joel Osment like physically as himself or whatever, as this child, because he's supposed to be like playing a normal child robot or whatever. And then Jude Law as Gigolo Joe has this makeup where it makes his face look kind of shiny. It's kind of funny because he's still, you know, it's 2001 Jude Law. Of course he still looks really hot, but he has this makeup that kind of reminds me a bit of the makeup from the musical Maybe Happy Ending that Darren Criss wears to like look more like a robot, of looking kind of shiny and having the lips sort of have like a bit more color to them and stuff, where it's like, you know, still looking human, but like looking a little off, or looking, you know, where the makeup's like very obvious and purpose and stuff. And it kind of reminds me of the makeup here a little bit. But then there's other characters where some of them are like robots that have screen faces, or you can see their, especially when we get to the flesh fair scene of like robots that are like missing parts and stuff that are like very obvious, where they only have like some human parts. But then there's ones like Teddy that are basically like a puppet and stuff. It's really interesting. But actually, the scene of Gigolo Joe when he's like first introduced, it's actually kind of nice, where he's talking to this woman. I don't remember what her name is. It's like kind of sweet and kind of sad actually. She's abused. I don't think he fully understands. Like she says that she deserves better, but asks her when he sees like her bruises of like, oh, are these like a crime of passion? And the reason she's like actually scared in that scene isn't because of the abuser. Actually, it's because she says like, oh, I've never slept with like a robot before, and he's like trying to reassure her that it'll be okay. He's like very self-confident in his services, where he keeps saying stuff throughout the movie of like, oh, once they've been with a mecha, they'll never want to go back to like a real human, sort of stuff, where he's like, you know, designed for sex, but he can't, and he's more human than David. I think probably because he's like built to be an adult. Like, you know, the robots can't grow up or anything, but like David purposely has like a child's mindset, but Gigolo Joe is like has been an adult his entire life. So besides the fact of like his job being of like having sex with people and stuff, but you'd have to, you know, have an adult mindset and be aware of things and stuff. So in that sense, he's kind of more human than David, but he doesn't have the love thing of like, or none of the robots do, of like being able to love unconditionally the way that David can. Like he does have the ability to care about things, like he cares about his clients and he grows to care about David, but it's like in a friendship way, or like in a doing services kind of thing. But yeah, the scene with the woman at the beginning is like kind of sweet, where he's trying to like reassure her, and there's a part where they both kind of laugh and he's like trying to get her to calm down and stuff. And then he goes to his next client and the client's immediately dead, and it's this whole thing that's actually kind of interesting. It made me, the parts when like Gigolo Joe's introduced almost makes me think of like Blade Runner or something, where he goes to see his next client. He doesn't realize at first that she has blood. Actually, the reveal kind of reminded me of the movie Goldfinger a little bit, where you see this woman and she's in bed, and then the camera moves down, and then it's that she has like an injury and she's like obviously dead, but like from the angle he's sitting, Joe can't see that, so he just thinks she's like laying there. It's basically like her human lover has killed her and blames Joe on it, or like the police are trying to catch Joe, so he's on the run, and then he ends up finding David. And then we get David's quest where he's like trying to be Pinocchio to become human so he'll be loved. And then we get the flesh flare stuff and other things, and the robots are treated so badly in this movie. They're like blamed for murder. They're seen as less than human. The unregistered ones, as they're called, are put out in these flesh flares where they're like rounded up and destroyed, and then they have to go to like scrap yards, or even their scraps are just dumped out in the middle of the woods, where mechas will show up and like look for replacement parts. And the thing is, like, all the mechas we see in this movie, I'm sure it's not the case for all of them in that world, maybe, I don't know, they all seem like really nice, like they're just trying to live their lives and do their jobs. They're not out there like trying to like kill humans or do anything purposely malicious, but the humans still treat them like shit anyway. And like even when they're broken and they're abandoned, they're still following like what they're constructed for, and they're like protective of each other. Like there's a nanny robot that immediately like has this protective instinct towards David and even like smiles at him before she gets like killed. There's the Chris Rock comedian robot that's like still telling jokes right before he's like launched out of a freaking cannon. Yeah, I'm not surprised that the flesh flares exist, because I feel like humans would hate the mechas. But they mention about the birth rates going down and like the world's going to shit, so it's kind of like the humans just want somebody to blame. I forgot that David was like the first robot child, to the point where like a little girl at the flesh fair, like her dad is like one of the workers there or something, meets David and thinks he's human and is telling her dad like, hey, there's a boy in the cage. And there's this one part where that's kind of cool, where there's like a scanner thing, because they can have technology that detects if someone's like a mecha or not, where it shows like the girl's skeleton like through her face a little bit, not in like a creepy way, and the mechanical parts in Teddy, and they do it on David, and it shows the mechanical parts, and I think they keep him in the cage, but they're like trying to get him out of there or something, and they don't do it in time. So like they know he's a robot, but you know, from the outside he looks so human, and because of the imprinting thing, he's so human, where he'll like, the reason he ends up with Joe is he like clings to Joe for safety and says, because he's obviously scared of this environment, says like to keep him safe, or like the workers are trying to talk to him and he's telling them what his name is, and it just sounds so human and genuine, like the way he says it. And the only reason Joe even survives is like David doesn't let go of his hand and then ends up getting spared because he has the ability to beg for his life, and the humans in the audience are like, mechas aren't able to do that, that must be a human child. Like, he sounds so human that the audience gets uncomfortable and they want him free, actually. Which makes me wonder, if they did the scanning thing and like showed his mechanical parts, would they still feel the same, or just the fact that he can like beg and seems too human is like the main thing that's like freaking them out, you know, rather than that he also looks human. We get to see a little bit of David's creator. I completely forgot until I like rewatched this that David's creator, Dr. Hobby, based David on his like real like passed away son, which kind of makes me wish that he kept the David robot then. Like, he eventually gets to meet David and even mentions about his son. You can see he's like still, you know, he's upset about it and stuff, but it's just a quick scene where the company is like, hey, we've located David, but they don't go after him. They just, because they want to see what he's like gonna do and stuff, they just sort of send him their way through a Robin Williams voiced like Google type thing called Dr. No. But yeah, I can understand why Dr. Hobby doesn't keep David, you know, besides him being like a prototype, and you'd probably have too much attachment of having around a robot that looks exactly like your deceased child. But at the same time, he's the person that cares about David the robot the most, so like, he gets so excited when he gets to meet David and stuff. Something that's funny too is we get scenes of Joe and David in the woods where David's trying to tell him about the blue fairy from Pinocchio that he's trying to find because he thinks that she's real, and based on their conversation it sounds like Joe goes with David because David saved his life, but also he wants to have sex with the blue fairy. It's just something about that's funny to me. And then David is brought to a city that's so sleazy and horny. There's statues of like nude women in sexual poses. Like, there's a bridge that goes into this statue of like an open woman, like a woman's like open mouth and everything. And then there's a part where they talk about church, that's kind of interesting. There's like multiple times in this movie I kept thinking about other movies or movies with like robots and stuff. Like, there's this part when Joe's trying to explain to David what a church is and like what people do there. He says something of like, the ones who made us always look for the ones that made them, and I was immediately looking for, hold on, sorry, my notes are like getting kind of messed up. Okay, no, I remember what I was going to say. I wanted to check later in my notes if I was making the same point or not. There's a thing that Joe says about the church of like, the ones who made us always look for the ones that made them, and immediately I'm thinking like, oh, that's the plot of the movie Prometheus, because I like just watched that a couple months ago. I rewatch that movie every once in a while, but it was funny thinking about that, because that's like the whole plot of that movie is the humans in that one, besides their ability to create androids, their whole mission is to go to an alien world to try to find their creators. And this is, I guess, the second movie I've seen, I didn't even think about it until I'm looking at these notes, about blonde android character named David that is so human-like that it makes the humans uncomfortable, because that's the whole thing with like Prometheus and Covenant, is the character David, where he thinks it's kind of weird that like he knows who his creators are of like humanity, and the fact that humanity wants to find like their own creators, but they like can't treat their own creations like kindly or anything, and it's like a whole thing. And I just thought like, dang, these movies do kind of have a lot of similarities. But then we get to meet Dr. No. Always nice to see like a Robin Williams character. It always just puts a smile on my face. But Dr. No, it's interesting, functions basically like Google. I forgot that Google existed in 2001, where they ask him a straightforward question, and then they have to tell him like to answer it in like a super specific way, or else he just tries to sell them things. And that's kind of where Joe comes in handy, because he kind of is just more knowledgeable about that stuff. It's kind of funny where Dr. No is like this Einstein looking projection, and he's like super bouncy and loud, but then once he seriously has to answer the question, he like locks in and his voice gets like super serious, and he starts this quote that's this passage from Dr. Hobby's book that's supposed to turn out later to be a hint from Dr. Hobby of like, hey, come and visit me, but they have it in like the form of a riddle. But it's this quote that's, I think, from like an actual book. Let me see real quick. I know this is gonna go a bit long, but I think I'm okay with that. Where is it? It's come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. I really like that line about for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. I feel like that goes hard, but the fact that it suddenly turns into a quote that's like specific to what David's looking for, mentioning about the fairy, like the blue fairy, but also the fact that it's like referring to a child going on this like adventure and stuff, and the stuff to lead David there is like kind of vague, where it mentions about lions weeping in the end of the world, and then they get to Manhattan where Dr. Hobby is, and it has these lion statues, and Manhattan's like flooded and mostly abandoned and stuff. Rebecca's apparently aren't allowed in. I find that kind of interesting. But yeah, anyway, then one of my favorite conversations in this movie happens. I completely had forgotten about that scene where Joe and David, they get into an argument where David is saying about how he gets really upset. I don't remember what triggers it exactly, and he says how he's special and unique, and he goes in this little tangent about how his mom will love him if he becomes human. It's sad because he's listing all these things about like, she'll tug me in at bed, and she'll read to me, and we'll play hide and seek and do like all these things, which again, that's why I wish he was given to like an actual childless couple, because he's such a sweet kid. Besides the fact that he's designed to be like quote unquote the perfect child, he's such like a sweet kid. He just wants like some basic affection they can't give him. And Joe, it's interesting how David always specifically says about how like I'm special and I'm unique. I think just mostly because that's what like everyone's telling him. And the thing is, he isn't saying it in like a snooty way or trying to act that way of like I'm so special, but like he just genuinely believes it. But I feel like he's interpreting it as like a I'm important, I deserve to be cared for kind of a way, is like how it comes off to me. And then Joe ends up having to explain to David that Monica doesn't actually love him. He says that like, he starts off saying stuff of like why the humans not want him, and he's listing things that I feel like are probably things from his own experience, about because he starts talking about clients and all the things that can go wrong of why humans might not want you, and he's completely honest about like humans hate the mechas because they'll survive the end of the world, because the world is still ending, and it's interesting the way the end of the world is portrayed, where like Manhattan's already gone and so is New York and a lot of other places, but there's cities where there's still people and stuff. Like Henry and his family live in like a nice area, but then you see the town, they find Dr. No and it's like, oof. You know, and humans know that the world will end within the next like 100 years or whatever, and I think just everyone's kind of accepted it, but it's not like the world's ending like as the movie's going on. But they know that the mechas will survive, and he says something about like they built us too smart, too quick, too whatever, and how humans only want them for their services and not like for who they are, and you know, we'll get rid of them whenever they want, which is like completely true. Like Joe's very honest, and you, as I've been mentioning, you like notice these things as the movie goes on, but it's also really sad. And the fact that he has to like explain all this to Dave. I mean, Joe doesn't know what David's for, you know, he doesn't know that David's a prototype that's made as like a child that can like, or a mecha specifically that can like truly love, and how sentient David really is compared to like all the other ones. He just thinks like, oh, it's just this child robot that I found, you know, whatever. So I guess I understand why he has to explain so harshly about sort of the truth to David, but it also kind of doesn't apply to him. And then David decides to let Joe leave. And then they go to Manhattan. They end up stealing like a helicopter. And then I got almost to the point where I had to stop the movie. It's basically that they go to the place where David's made, and David finds the first person David runs into isn't even Dr. Hobby. It's one of the other David bots. I'll refer to the protagonist as like our David, or like the prototype or whatever, just to make it easy. So he runs into this other David, and the other David is already more like human-like, but also talks in kind of a creepy way. Like he has a way more sounding human voice, but it says stuff that in a way that doesn't really feel natural. It almost reminds me of like how prototype David was before he got imprinted, kind of, but that's probably supposed to be the point. And then our David just crashes out and freaking decapitates the copy, saying how he's like yelling and having a tantrum, and he picks up like a light stand and smashes it at the copy, and it immediately is decapitated, which is crazy because I can imagine all of these mechas are probably really strong, you know, because they're made out of metal. But David has like, you literally read it on the poster of like, he's like 60 pounds, and I think like 4'6", you know, like he has literally the physicalities despite knowing he's like being a robot and stuff of like an actual like 11-year-old. So the fact that he has the strength to just decapitate someone that's his own size, like literally another him, that easily, like imagine what he could have done to Martin. That's the other thing where I kind of get Henry's point in the beginning of the movie of like, hey, David might be capable for like hate and violence if he's like capable of love. Who knows what he's gonna do? And you know, you don't see that true with Martin. You know, David, that's the person David should be jealous of, you know, because it's like his mom's human child, but he's not. But then literally as soon as David meets like another version of himself, he freaks out, and it might sound like I'm saying like, oh, you know, he's not seeing himself as special anymore, and that's what's causing him to freak out, which is true. But besides proving Henry right, I mean, Henry is proven right of David's violence, but also David says something of like, you can't have her or whatever. I think he thinks because there's another David, besides the fact that he's not special, it's that what if this David goes for Monica's affections, even though that's like not possible anymore. But yeah, he destroys that David, and then he gets to meet Dr. Hobby, and Dr. Hobby sees and isn't even upset or anything. But he says how like David basically has become human in like a personality sense, because David's like, I wanted to be real, and Dr. Hobby's like, you are real, you're amazing. And he talks about how special David is, and how he's so proud of him for going on this journey, and isn't even mad that like David got abandoned because he wanted to see what David would do. And then David gets really sad that he's like not as special as he thought he was. There's something he says about that of like, I'm not special, and then Dr. Hobby says something, and then David says this like really sad line. I think he said, no, it wasn't that sad. I think he says something like, my brain feels like it's melting or something. And then Dr. Hobby leaves, and he's like, I'm gonna go get your other creators, and you're gonna tell us everything, and then we're gonna tell you what we're gonna do with you. Which makes me wonder, because the thing is, David finds a room, and from this point I didn't watch, but like I remember that David finds the room that has the other Davids and the Darlenes, and basically sees of like, I mean, I don't know if David's aware that he's specifically a prototype and how that would have worked, but his whole thing is like being special, and he destroys all of them, and then he tries to commit suicide by jumping in the water, and then you never see Dr. Hobby again. But it made me wonder, ever since I first watched the movie, of like, what was Dr. Hobby gonna do with David? I mean, I guess since David's a prototype and they built all these other Davids that are better, you know, I guess in that sense it doesn't really matter what they do with the prototype. Like, in a product sense, they could just get rid of him, and, you know, he's been used for their goal. But David, you know, the fact that they're so proud of him as the prototype of like, he went on this journey and did these things, and that already makes David special. So I can imagine they probably learn everything from him. And I mean, I don't know what they would do with him is the problem. I'm assuming they would keep him, because they either could do that, or they could give him, sorry if there's a weird noise, I just kind of squished a water bottle a little. Or I could imagine they, I don't know, maybe best case scenario, like give him back to Monica, because even if they treat David well, he's going to want to go back to his mom. Otherwise, it's like they'd have to destroy him, because like Monica and Henry didn't want David. But it just makes me wonder about that, of like, what were they going to do with him? Anyway, and then David jumps into the water and Joe rescues him. And this is the part where I feel like the movie could have actually ended. Where it's basically that David finds like a resort thing. I think it's Coney Island. I think it's literally that like Coney Island is underwater, and David finds a giant statue that's like that looks like the Blue Fairy, and then Joe tries to rescue David, and they end up inside of their helicopter. No, it's like something designed for the water, like a water vehicle. And then David, oh wait, no, I don't think it's that they're underwater. I think he sees the figure underwater, and then Joe gets captured by a magnet. They don't try to rescue him, but instead David and Teddy go to find the Blue Fairy underwater, and then they get trapped by a Ferris wheel. And then, it's specifically called the Wonder Wheel. Okay, so it's like an existing thing. So David thinks the Blue Fairy's real, and I mean, he's trapped underwater anyway, so there isn't anything he could do. And he asks the fairy, the statue, to make him into a real boy, and then his power goes off, and yeah. I feel like, because there is more, and believe me, it gets kind of crazy. I feel like this would have been the perfect way to end the movie, because the actual ending of the movie is happier, but I feel like it almost hurts more. I feel like this would have been nice, because I mean, technically, it's the end of David's journey, and he is getting what he wanted of like, hey, he went out to search for the Blue Fairy, and now he found her. And I mean, he's in this loop of like asking her stuff, and he's trapped under the water forever, and he's never going to see Monica again. And he ends up trapped in there for a long freaking time. And then his power goes out, so it's basically like he keeps asking her for this one thing until he like dies. But I mean, I don't think he could have gone back to Monica. I mean, maybe if her and Henry knew like, oh, okay, he went on this whole journey just to be made real, just so we'd accept him. I mean, if that was me and I found out this stuff and I was in Monica's shoes, you'd bet I'd want that kid back, you know. But I mean, it was really more up to Henry than Monica. But I feel like it would have been a good place. Like, it is a bummer of like, you know, David's trapped in there forever, but he, you know, because of his programming, is so obsessed with Monica anyway. He's not upset about being trapped down there, and he was so focused on the Blue Fairy more than like anything else in the world. Not that he's like happy when he finds her or anything, but he technically got what he wanted. And it would have been nice to end there. But no, the movie continues and it gets confusing and weird. There's these new characters that I thought were aliens because they look like aliens, but they're actually robots. So what basically happened, I'm going to pull up Wikipedia again so I can get this right. 2,000 years later, humans are dead, and Manhattan, because it was like underwater, it's now under ice. The mechas got to survive, and like I said, I thought they were aliens. They're not. They have evolved into a different kind of AI where they're like basically smarter than humans or something. They're a group that's called like the Specialists or whatever, and they're interested in studying humanity, and they find David, and Teddy is also there, and they resurrect them. And then it gets kind of weird where they remake David's home, but it's like a hologram type thing. It's not like real, and it's based on David's memories, and they give him a version of the blue fairy that he can talk to. It's basically I don't know if they think he's gonna be like scared if he meets them or anything, or maybe because they know he's so obsessed with the blue fairy because they can see inside of his mind. I think it's because they want to like keep studying him or whatever. So they give him like a hologram to talk to, the blue fairy, but it's really the aliens using it as a mouthpiece. So that way David thinks it's like, okay, he's like finally met the blue fairy after all these years. And David, I don't think, from what I remember, freaks out about like, oh, I've been like dead for 2,000 years and everyone being dead. I think it is nice that the advanced mechas do still talk to David like he's a child through the blue fairy, of like not telling him of like, hey, humanity's dead and whatever. But I think the ending is kind of weird where it's like they tell David of like, yeah, you can't become human, that's impossible. And then they recreate Monica, but not like the actual Monica. It's basically the hair that Teddy kept, which I don't know how the hell Teddy kept it for all this time. Whatever. Apparently that has Monica's DNA and they can remake her, but it's kind of shitty in that, I mean, it's technically giving David what he wants and one day is enough, but it's that, oh yeah, we're gonna remake your mom, but she can only be alive for one day and then she can never come back to life. She'll basically just die. So then David gets to spend one day with Monica, and you'd think if you had one day with your loved one in some kind of imaginary simulation where you could do whatever the hell you want, most people would probably try to have like the most amazing day of their life and maybe go on a vacation or something, because it's like an imaginary world. But for David, it's really sad because it's exactly like being at home, but it's as if Henry and Martin didn't exist, basically. Where he just spends the day with her. I think they end up playing hide and seek and just playing and doing fun stuff, and then I think she falls asleep. He doesn't even get like a full day with her. She falls asleep in the evening at like when the sun's going down. They don't even get nighttime where he gets like tucked in. It's basically that she's in her room and she falls asleep and to die, and he knows this, and she tells him that she's always loved him, which isn't true, and then he just lays next to her, and I think he plans to die. I don't remember what the dialogue is. I think it's something of like, oh, they both fell asleep and never woke up again. It's something like that. I feel like the voiceover of that dialogue really adds to it. But yeah, and then you see Teddy. I feel bad for Teddy because then Teddy climbs into the bed because Teddy's there too, and then he just goes to watch them, and I think lays with them because David can't sleep, so he just closes his eyes and just never wakes up. David basically chooses death since Monica is dead. And I mean, the aliens revived, or not the aliens, the advanced mechas like revived David. They could probably keep studying him, and they could probably give him whatever simulation he wants or whatever, they could probably do so much more with him. David will never die, but in terms of his world and what he wants, if Monica's dead, there's like no reason for him to continue living. And I feel bad for Teddy because it's like Teddy watches over David, and he's not as obsessed with David as like David is with Monica, but he just follows David around and helps him out and whatever. So like poor Teddy, because like David is choosing to die now that Monica's like dead, and Teddy just is kind of there. Teddy doesn't fall asleep with them or anything. But yeah, that's the ending where David gets one happy day with Monica, which is it's sad in that it's so simple what he wants, but it's kind of impossible. I mean, he did spend that time with Monica a little bit, like even when Martin was there, and David is included with stuff, but it just sucks because like before Martin enters the picture, Monica doesn't really spend much time with him. But I guess it's like more realistic. But the fact that it would be so easy to give him what he wants of just them hanging out for the day or whatever, like even though like I'm a child of 2, like I have a brother and that's it, even when I was little and stuff, my parents would make sure like to give us individual time and everything, and it was easy. Sometimes we'd go out to lunch or hang out the whole day or whatever, not that they're like purposely ignoring their other child. So like it is doable. The fact that Monica just couldn't give him that even when Martin was there or not is like weird to me. Maybe it's the whole thing of like deep down she knows that he's like just a machine and treats him as such, whether like Martin's there or not. Or maybe the movie is truly saying like, yeah, a human couldn't love a mecha the way a mecha could, that the whole experience was impossible. I don't know, but like it's the closest to like giving David a happy ending, so it's happy in that regard. But it doesn't even really feel bittersweet to me. It just feels sour. And that's why I prefer the ending of like the blue fairy thing with the underwater stuff, because it's like, okay, yeah, he didn't get to see Monica ever again or become human or any of that. But I mean, you find out from like the actual ending that like David didn't really want to be human. It was more of that he just wanted his mother's love. The fact that it has to turn out that way is weird. Of like the Monica revival thing. Even though David's perfectly happy in that ending, but the fact that he just ends up like, I feel like narratively he ends up underwater and he finds the blue fairy and it just ends. I mean, that feels more realistic than anything. I think that's why it just kind of hits better. But yeah, I feel weird like ending wise with this movie. But overall it's just really good. I think with the way it's like filmed and everything, I think a lot of the camera stuff can get very like creative. I thought the acting was really good. I especially noticed that like David barely ever like blinks or anything, and a lot of the scenes like you really get to like see his eyes. The fact that they're like so blue that there's like one of the other posters is like completely white and his eyes are just there in the background. It's like it's a little creepy. They stand out so much. But he doesn't really like blink or anything. That's what I was talking about with like the robot acting, and he moves in a way, how like kids would like kind of slouch or run around David like doesn't do any of that, and that adds to the like creepiness but also kind of accuracy of like, oh yeah, he's supposed to be like a robot and stuff. But yeah, this is like one of my favorite sci-fi movies. Like I said, I really like fictional robot movies. I'd say this one and Electric Dreams are probably my 2 favorites because it's like the closest of like what I'm kind of interested in of like, and I guess the one, Bicentennial Man, that's the Robin Williams ones, because it's like these 3 movies where like one of them is about like this child that just wants to be acknowledged by his parents and his journey to like become human just for that. And then Bicentennial Man is about an android that becomes more human, like even physically over time. And he just wants to be like acknowledged as a human and like treated as such. And then what was the third one? Electric Dreams is a kind of this weird 80s love triangle movie about a computer and a guy that's like in love with the same woman. And it's like sort of a comedy. But in like all 3 of those, the main like robot character is like not treated well by the surrounding humans, and they're already so human-like anyway, but the fact that they just will not be recognized as such by the human characters is almost just kind of frustrating as the viewer. But yeah, still one of my favorite movies I've seen. I gotta watch it from start to finish again at some point. I haven't seen it in like probably like 5 to 10 years. But I would have absolutely finished it if I didn't get interrupted. But I have it on DVD. I can watch it whenever. I'll probably wait a while. It is one of those I think I do want to watch with my friends eventually. I don't know. But yeah, that's that. Super good. It's apparently based on a book, actually. It's called Super Toys Last All Summer Long. Oh, the book's from like the 60s. Damn. But yeah, I've never read the short story. I'm thinking maybe I'll read it. I'm kind of curious how it compares, because it's supposed to be about, like, it says the loneliness epidemic in an overpopulated future where child creation is controlled. Huh. Oh, okay, the story was used for the first act of the movie, so I guess the stuff with wait, let me read this really quick. Oh, okay, the plot of the book is literally the same as the movie, even like the character names of like except that David, I don't know if they say that David's a machine. Hold on, let me read this and I want to just talk about it for a second. Damn, okay, I just want to read this from the book really quick. I'm not gonna like do a review of it later. It's it's that Monica and Henry's son is David, and Teddy is also there, and Monica is confused why she doesn't feel any emotion towards David, like compassion. And David apparently writes these letters where he's like jealous of Teddy, and Monica's kind of weirded out by it. And apparently Monica connects better with Teddy, who is still a robot toy, better than David. And then she's excited when she finds out her family's been chosen to be able to like give birth to a child. And then it's revealed that David is a robot and is a replacement for like an actual child, or used as a replacement for one because they weren't allowed to have kids. And then it's that David is having some kind of quote unquote malfunctioning problems, which make me think not really, and that he has to get sent to the factory. And then it ends with David thinking about his mom. So it sounds like David's a robot, but I guess the characters know that, but the audience doesn't. And the mom's like, damn, why don't I feel anything for my robot son? And then it's that she's allowed to have a child, because they're not allowed to in this story, because of the future being like overpopulated. And then it's revealed to the audience that David's a robot, and then they decide to like, I guess, get rid of David. So yeah, it's just like the first part of the movie, which I feel like that was my favorite because I just found it really interesting. But damn, the fact that they had to reveal that David was a robot and that and everything. I actually do kind of wish they had that in the movie, because the movie starts off with a scene, not even of David, but it's of Dr. Hobby giving a mecha demonstration with this female mecha that's like his secretary or something, and the reveal of her being a robot, and they talk about like, oh, we're gonna build a robot child, and then you get introduced to David. And I kind of wish we didn't have that portion of the beginning, and if it was just the stuff starting with Henry and Monica and David showing up, and then having the reveal of David being a robot, especially because he looks so human when he's like introduced and everything, and then his behavior is slightly creepy. I feel like that would have been kind of cool, actually. All right, but yeah, I've been talking about this for almost 2 hours. My bad. It's just I have so many thoughts about this movie, probably even more so. I will probably make that playlist eventually of like, once I watch enough of them, just I don't know, for me to keep track, I guess. Maybe send it to friends of like fictional robot movie reviews. I'm not gonna get that specific for like playlists, but it's just this is the one I care about the most. But yeah, I'll definitely do more in the future. I mentioned a couple. I don't know when I'm gonna watch them. All right, bye.